Welcome back, everybody, guys and gals, to the Bitcoin 15. I'm your host, Peter Beckstrom, always with me, my co-host, Peter Christensen. This week, we touch on a few topics of cryptocurrency passing 100 million users worldwide, the Nigerian government backpedaling on previous statements, the environmental impact of Bitcoin on the world, and MIT gets involved in the defense of Bitcoin. I'll kick it over to you, Gonzo, to talk about some of those headlines.
Yeah, so a couple just really quick good stories that happened in the world of Bitcoin this week. Google, the giant that they are
Ever heard of it?
in the tech, yeah, ever heard of them? They have a Google Finance page, and they've decided to add a crypto tab to their finance page. So there's a quick way for users to keep tabs on the prices of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So you don't have to stray too far from their resources. If you're checking on your stocks, you can check on your Google prices real quick too there. So that's kind of nice. Another quick, easy one you mentioned in the intro there. It's the milestone of 100 million users worldwide of cryptocurrencies has been surpassed. It was surpassed in January, but the news broke this week that according to a report by, I believe it was CoinDesk.
Yeah.
Which checks out with the 1.3% of the population that we talked about last week. Actually, I hadn't done the math, but I checked it when they said 100 million was surpassed. So yeah, that's about 1.3% of the world population. So like we said last week, we're still pretty early. But those are just two quick good stories we want to talk about. But why don't you tell us about kind of the negative that happened this week in Bitcoin, I guess, the bad, as we like to say.
Oh, the bad. Let's not talk about it. Actually, let's talk about it. The bad is the Bitcoin crash, the Bitcoin correction, the 15K drop from the start of the week at 58, almost 59K down to, I think, currently close to 43K when this will launch here on YouTube. We don't always like to talk about the price. Early episodes we did, but now we're getting away from it because it just keeps going up. But this is a good correction. And welcome to the spin zone. We can make this sound good any way we want. And I think before, if we looked at some of the stock to flow models and some of just predictions, what was it, 50K at April?
55K, yeah.
55K at April. So we're kind of back on track for that. And it's good for the naysayers who say look at a dip, but it's also good for the hodlers and people who understand, hey, I can actually stack more sats, or I can stack more Bitcoin at a cheaper value. And I hedging on it will increase in the short term, but definitely in the long term. So I do see it as a good, even though it is kind of the big talk from a bad point of view this week. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, those of us in the long term and those of us who got in earlier, it's par for the course. We're used to seeing these pullbacks in past pricing cycles of halving cycles every 4 years. On these bull runs, they tend to have these big pullbacks, 30 to 40% sometimes. So it's really shouldn't be unexpected by those of us actually you and I aren't that early adopters. We weren't there for the last halving cycle, but we've looked at the past and we can recognize that that's how it happened in the past, and yet it continues to go up. And we knew that sometimes hysteria causes the price to inflate higher than it should be. It's the retail money getting ahead of the institutional money, and then people get scared. So yes, we say it's a good buying opportunity for those who want to stack more sats. It doesn't feel good if you're the guy who bought at 58.5K last week because you're like, oh, it's going to the moon right now. But hey, don't panic, hold on. We're convinced this is just a correction, not a crash, as you said. So we'll ride this out together.
Yeah, it's definitely easier for us who got in, like you said before that big bull run, or even bought at 58, because we're still in the black. But for the individuals who I have spoken with that have gotten in recently because of what they saw that the bull run. Well, it's like, didn't you see the bull run earlier too? Like this last 2020. Anyways, they were like, hey, I'm down $200. And I was like, well, you've only put in 500. So relax, it's coming back. But yeah, it is scary. And I had a conversation with somebody else earlier, and I said, I was like, I would love to keep going down, but I think we don't want to go down too much further just for public opinion, but also public support or people on the fringes. It's good, and there's the good and the bad of it. But I think we've also established that new floor was what 25-30, and it'll continue to go up there. But we'll see what it'll look like here at the end of Q1. It'll be interesting.
We're on the record that we think the floor is around 25, and hopefully this pullback is proof that this pullback levels off somewhere in the 40s. Hopefully that's proof that the floor has really gone up quite a bit, actually, and that's good to know. But yeah, let's not dwell on this point too long, I guess. So let's move into, we're going to talk, instead of just one big interesting story of the week, we're going to talk a few this week, just the way the story shook out. And the first one, as you mentioned in the intro as well, Nigeria, who previously their central bank and their government, I guess, was trying to ban cryptocurrencies, and they didn't like what it was doing to their local currency. I believe it's called the Naira. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Not gonna try.
They seem to have a difference of opinion within their government now. Their vice president disagrees with their country's Securities and Exchange Commission and states that cryptocurrencies should be regulated rather than banned. And I kind of see this as good, even though they're still looking for regulation. I still not banning it from their people, I think is good. And the other good side of it that I see is, despite the ban, the young tech-savvy citizens of Nigeria are still using Bitcoin and exchanging it, and they're even buying it at a premium of 46%. Which, if that doesn't tell you how much, I mean, let that sink in. If that doesn't tell you how much they think their local government-issued currency, the Naira, is worthless, I don't know what'll tell you. If they're willing to pay a 46% premium, and they still think it'll be a better long-term hold of value, that just speaks volumes. But I'd like to hear your take on this story before we move on.
That's a good one. I talk to people who say Bitcoin is so expensive. I said, hey, it's worse in Nigeria, where it's 46% higher. So stop complaining, finish your milk.
You privileged American.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of my spin here on why I thought it was the bad as an American, and I see Bitcoin as being kind of the land of the free, the decentralized, no regulation. It's a pure it's the pure form of digital gold, like we've said, where you don't need a bank, you don't need people regulating. The Bitcoin itself is self-regulating with the open ledger and the halvings and the slow rollout of Bitcoin of 21 million, only ever 21 million. I always think whenever you have government intervention, and again, this could be the American view, that it'll always be a negative. And so from my perspective, I do see this as a bad article because of those two reasons. Could I be convinced? Sure. Because it could always be better if it's regulated instead of prohibited. That's a win. But I still see it being a negative right now, and that's my stance. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, for sure. So why don't you take us into the next story then?
Yeah.
What we got here?
Another story that dropped this week was Jack Dorsey. Ever heard of him? Michael Saylor. If you haven't heard of that guy and you're listening to this, the 50 people that do, you go check out his stuff. And then the Winklevoss twins, all have come out and with the support of MIT to help back the defense of Bitcoin. And I see this as being a great victory for Bitcoin. Like we talked about, we thought Bitcoin in itself was secure, or maybe that's what we've talked ourselves into. But now there's $4 million, and it'll probably increase as we, there's $1 trillion in Bitcoin. So as more money gets pumped into it, it's great that there's backing like this from heavy whales in the game to do research and to do development programs to help strengthen the Bitcoin network. That's kind of my my take on it as being the good and the interesting, that you have just the powerhouse of MIT with the financial backing and some of the visionaries that have invested so much into it. There is kind of a gray area towards the end of the article that will be, of course, included in this episode, where the Digital Currency Initiative's parent organization, MIT Media Lab, went through its own struggles within the last year, where they even found out that some of the money that they've gotten was from convicted sex offender and late financier Jeffrey Epstein, who was a big Bitcoin fan. So,
whoa. I didn't know this was a part of this story, folks. He's dropping this on me. He's dropping bombs. The Epstein bomb.
It's not good. It's not
good. That's not good. So my reaction to the story, though, is we'll leave the conspiracy stuff to the side, and we just don't want to touch that guy with the 10-foot pole. But anyhow, the good side of this, of course, is even though Bitcoin being decentralized is very secure, I love that we're not resting on our laurels here, and the titans of the Bitcoin industry are saying we got to do whatever we can to stay ahead of the game and keep this safe and secure for the masses, so people can put their trust in it. Because Gemini, the Winklevoss twins, they're one of the leaders in the industry of being a good custodian that people feel like they can trust to keep their Bitcoin if they don't trust, doing self-custody, which that's a big thing for a lot of people. I don't want to get into this stuff. I'm afraid of losing it. I don't know how to protect it. Or didn't people get hacked and lost their Bitcoin? Well, when they kept it on shady exchanges, we need more people increasing that security so people can trust this. If this is truly going to go from 1.3% to something like, 50%, or of course, hopefully one day it's 100%. That's really the ultimate goal. So, good on them, and, we'll stay away from the Epstein stuff. Finally, I just wanted to talk about a story that came out. Well, actually, I'm not going to speak to the specific story, I guess, but there's been a lot of discussion about trying to tear down Bitcoin because it uses too much energy, and therefore does it have a negative impact on the environment? And yes, it uses a lot of energy, right? We're not going to run from that. Bitcoin mining, how we get more Bitcoin into circulation, and how we process transaction goes through mining, and these supercomputers take a lot of energy, and that of course people are always worried about the carbon footprint in the year 2021, and rightfully so. That's something that matters. We're all thinking about that more and more in this day and age. But I just want to bring up that people, I think, want to use this as a way to tear down Bitcoin. It's people that probably actually have ulterior motives. And the truth is, Bitcoin can help be a solution to transitioning to cleaner energy. As we've seen that their Bitcoin mining is popping up in kind of remote places where energy is cheap, but sometimes those cheaper forms of energy are green sources of energy, geothermal, stranded wind, or solar. Like if you're in a desert, or hydroelectric in a jungle or something, these are places we can capture green energy sources that are hard to get to the grid, but you could set up a little Bitcoin mining remote station, and then it now makes sense financially to set up this little settlement off somewhere remote because of the Bitcoins that are being mined. So that's one point. Maybe you can bring up some of the other points we discussed, because I'm going long there.
Yeah, and we want to kind of keep through the name too of the 15 for all those 15ers out there. But I think it does check the balances of or check the boxes of, oh, Bitcoin is done for shady work, and it's like, well, that's been debunked. Oh, Bitcoin is extremely volatile and it's going to be gone tomorrow. It's like, well, it's got a huge user adoption, over $1 trillion has been pumped into it. Like, check that market. Oh, the tulip craze, it's gonna, it's short term. It could be gone. Well, it's been around for 12 years, and more people are doing it now. It's polluting the earth at a higher rate than what New Zealand does. In 1 year, what New Zealand has done. I think that was one of the suggested. It's also the suggested estimate. So it's like, how are you getting these estimates? Like you mentioned too on one of our conversations earlier off air, that Bitcoin is wearing its carbon footprint on its sleeve, where all the other institutions aren't. And like you hit on, the other institutions need to be in the grid, because you can't send electricity more than 500 miles, in either direction, and then it loses out on its whatever the output of it. But
due to losses in the lines.
Due to losses. So it has the potential, and this is, I know we're a little bit long, but being two guys who are from fairly remote areas growing up, and kind of seeing, like, I first thought maybe COVID would, little pandemic, hey, decentralized, maybe people move out of the city, get to some smaller areas, space, rejuvenate. That might be happening across the US or other parts of the world. I'm not quite sure. But that was kind of my, hey, if anything comes out of this, maybe this will be it. Now, as I learn more about the Bitcoin, the potential or the opportunity that's there for the renewables, to get off the grid and go to these other areas that don't have infrastructure set up today, well, they could start harnessing those green energies and start small, and potentially, you bring the town to the green energies before we're kind of building wherever maybe there was water, but now we can kind of go back to what that mindset was before, and go to these areas that are untapped, and become more in tune with these green energies, and start an infrastructure there that we wouldn't otherwise.
Well, not only green energy, I forgot about this point, but also using what would be wasted natural gas, like in oil mining operations. There's waste natural gas that needs to be flared.
Yeah.
And just because if you just emit the methane, it is dangerous. So they have to burn the methane because that's cleaner. It still puts out CO2. Well, so they'll take that waste methane and use generators, which will still emit CO2, but it's way cleaner. And now we're not just burning waste methane, we're converting it to Bitcoin. And so there's multiple creative ways that Bitcoin is actually helping provide solutions. So the bottom line is, like you said, Bitcoin wears its carbon footprint on sleeves, whereas the traditional banking system, mining gold, minting coins, printing money, brick and mortar banks, however, all this stuff, online banking, this stuff all takes energy too. And that's colossal. No one has any idea what that is. So if say you like the idea of Bitcoin, but you're like, oh, I love the planet, I can't get involved with this is anti-environment, you got to rule out that reason. If that's what's holding you back, forget it. That's been debunked. Right here on this show, we debunked it, right? So
smash that like button, hit subscribe. We're going to be debunking more myths about Bitcoin that just aren't true. So
tell your mom about this show. Tell your cat. Tell your cousins. Tell your boss. Tell your tax accountant. It's tax season, so whoever. Tell everybody about this show if they're interested in this topic. So thanks for being with us. I think we better wrap.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Later.
Stay safe.